Hello again everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about the next race that is introduced in the Starcraft miniatures game. This is the video for the Protoss faction. Protoss are the more elite of the three factions in Starcraft. This is how it's always been ever since Brood War, and it continues to be that way on the tabletop. They have a heavy focus on strong individual units and psychic powers. They have a lot of tricks, and they have a nice balance between melee units and ranged units. So let's take a look at the units first and dive into the faction and talk about their abilities and how they're going to play on the tabletop. The first unit we're going to look at is the Zealot. Now, if you haven't seen our last video, we did talk a little bit about the various stats and stuff, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. And again, this is the beta, so a lot of things are going to change, so I'm not going to dwell too deeply on certain specific numbers in terms of points or anything, but we're going to give a nice high-level overview of what the different units and tactics do and how you can expect them to perform on the tabletop. So the Zealot is our first unit. This is the main core unit for Protoss across every game that they've ever had. They are a melee-focused unit. Zealots have 3 shield. Now, shield is, for the most part, specific to Protoss. You do not remove your first model in the unit until the damage the unit has taken is equal to the HP plus the shield. So effectively, the first model in the unit has 7 health. The subsequent Zealots only have 4 health. It's a nice way to give them durability while they get into range. Their speed is 4-7, which is basically the average of the game for the most part that we've seen so far. Their evasion is a 5+, and their armor is a 4+, so pretty decent, especially once they get into melee and start to get that evade roll. 4 HP is pretty good in general with the extra shield. That's fairly nice, and size 2 is normal. They are squads of 3 baseline, and they will go down to 1 supply when you get to 1 model left, but they do start at 2 supply, which is pretty high for core units in the game compared to, Marines and Zerglings and stuff. But their stat line is a little bit stronger than both. Obviously, Marines at 2 HP and Zerglings at 1 HP. The Zealot at 4 is going to feel individually tougher, but there's only 3 of them in the unit. They come stock with 2 abilities. First, they get Charge. You don't have to upgrade Zealot Charge. When determining charge distance for this unit, you may roll 2d6 instead of d6 and select the highest. That is for 1 biomass. That shouldn't say biomass, that should probably say psi energy. This is still the beta. There's going to be some typos that get cleaned up. The resource for Protoss is psi energy, or psionic energy. So for 1, you basically get to have a better charge roll for Zealots. That's probably worth using when you need it. It's better to put yourself in a situation where you are less reliant on the roll, but it is still nice to have for important rolls, especially if you've got the psi kind of kicking around at that point. Then they have a passive ability, Devastating Charge, which gives them impact hits, 3 per model hitting on 4s. That's pretty darn powerful. Zealots on average will be getting 5 or 6 hits before they even start rolling their psi blades. So that will start to clear out a lot of units, especially low HP units like Zerglings and Marines. Even the Devastating Charge hit can kill plenty of stuff before they make their actual melee attack. And their melee attack is good. 4 dice per model, 3+ to hit is very reliable, and they get Surged Light for D3. These things will shred anything light in the game, which is a lot of the units, at least in this very first release. So expect Zealots to basically hit most things that are not armored and delete them from the board quite quickly. Now, the Zealots do have a few different upgrades that they can purchase. First is My Life for Ire. When resolving impact hits, each eligible model generates 1 additional die. You probably want to take this because, again, they're doing a lot of damage, and this is just letting them do more damage. Leg Enhancements is the next one. This unit performs a 2-inch move action in the movement phase, does not count towards its limit action. It costs 1 psi. 1 psi to give yourself effectively +2 move for the turn is pretty good, and you can do it like in weird timings because it's a ability, or it's a active ability and not an actual move. So you might be able to like use it after disengaging, for instance. You might not always spend the Psi to use this, but I do think it's worth purchasing for Zealots just to give them a little bit of extra mobility and make sure they get into combat. In the Assault phase, you can purchase Zealous Round. This is a reaction that costs 0 Psi energy, so it's free, but you do have to pay for the upgrade. When this unit is not activated and receives damage, you can count this unit as activated in this phase to reduce the total damage by 2, flips its activation marker. So basically, you can't charge or run, but you do get to reduce damage by 2 once in the phase. It is nice to survive, but as a melee unit, Zealots are going to kind of live and die by whether they get to where they're going and get into combat. I would almost rather take the damage just to make sure I'm charging, just to make sure that I'm actually getting into combat where I want to be. Though I think it's going to be a very, very powerful ability when you want to throw Zealots onto an objective, for instance, or when they really need to move block a choke point, for instance. Just being able to survive and be in the place is probably better in a lot of instances, but I do see myself a lot of times taking this upgrade and then not using it because I do want to run or I do want to charge. It's probably still worth the points to take the upgrade though. Finally, in the combat phase, we stand as 1. When making an attack roll, if the target is engaged with at least one other friendly unit, this unit gains Precision 2. That's a passive. This is pretty nice. I mean, Precision 2 is great. They're already pretty accurate units, but just getting the extra free hits is very nice. Again, Precision 2 means that after you roll your hit dice, you take 2 misses and they become hits. However, this does require kind of setup for them to be engaged with at least one other friendly unit. The only things that really want to be in combat right now are Zealots and Artanis. The other Protoss units, Stalker, Adept, and Sentry, are not really melee pieces, so this is a really good upgrade to take if you're taking a lot of Zealots, or the special Zealots for the Kali, but it's not one I think I would jump to if you're running a really combined arms force. So that's one that I think will depend on how you're building your list and the sort of effects you want throughout the game. But the first 3 upgrades I think are pretty good in basically any situation in any list. You will not be mad at taking these upgrades. Overall, the Zealot is a really solid first unit. They are a bit more durable than a lot of other units in the game, and they hit like trucks. Your opponent will have to think about Zealots and have to focus on making sure that they don't reach or take a lot of damage before they reach melee range, and that sort of threat is enough to protect your other units. Having kind of a, I guess, distraction card effects, if you want to borrow a Warhammer term, as your core unit is very, very interesting, and I think Protoss are going to enjoy running their Zealots. Next, we've got our Adepts. These are our other core units for Protoss, and they fill a very different role than Zealots. They come with 2 shield, so less durable than Zealots. Speed 5-8, so faster, and in fact, a pretty decent speed overall in terms of the game. They have evasion 5+ and armor 5+, so they're a little bit squishier, and 3 HP at size 2. So they are considerably less durable than Zealots, but you do get an extra model in the unit. Now, these are only 1 supply at 4, and the unit size is 4. They go down to 0 at 1 to 2. So the Zealots are going to be a little bit better at holding objectives and fighting, but the Adept have range and they have tricks. Their primary trick, let's talk about it right now, is in the movement phase, they can spend a Psi to put out a Shade token. Psionic Transfer, place a Shade token wholly within 12 of any Adept model using movement rules. At the end of the round, you can place all models of this unit within coherency range of that token. Shade token has displacement. Now, the token is... I don't believe tokens block movement. I'll have to double check that, and these rules are still kind of new to all of us, but it does give you a lot of utility in terms of mobility. It gives you a token that your opponent will have to think about in terms of where they can or can't end their move, where they think you're going to end up moving. It's a nice tool. If you've played Starcraft 2, you know how annoying Adepts can be at their ability to just kind of run up, shoot, and then teleport away. And you can kind of do that with Adepts here. Because of how much you kind of have to commit in a tabletop game to like go to objectives, stand on tokens, stuff like that, I don't know how often you're going to be just using the psionic transfer to kind of jaunt around the board, but it can be kind of used as a defensive tool where you start on an objective, you play psionic transfer, and then move somewhere away from the objective, and then jump back to where you came from to kind of lock it down in case something comes to try to steal it. So it's got a lot of utility, but I don't think it's something you're going to use necessarily every single turn. This is, however, the core unit with a ranged weapon as opposed to Zealots, who are pure melee. Adepts have the glaive cannon. This is range 8, so a little bit on the shorter side. It targets both air and ground, which is great. 2 shots each, hitting on 3s, very accurate, with Surge Light D3 plus 1, very good. And anti-evade 1, which means a lot of times the evade roll is coming from being in combat with the thing that you're shooting. So if something charges you, like say Zealots or Zerglings, that anti-evade is going to just make your shooting a little bit stronger, especially because they're really not good in melee. Their combat phase attack is 1 dice each, hitting on 4s. It's very bad if they have to punch something. So the glaive cannon being good against light and having anti-evade 1 is going to make them good at shooting into the thing that they're in combat with. But you will think twice about charging Adepts because they are really good at shredding up light units like Zerglings. Now, Adepts have a couple upgrades as well. Hey everyone, Editor Zach here, just jumping in to say that the upgrade I'm about to talk about was added to the Adept as a core ability. This is just something that they always have access to, so everything I'm going to say is still true and it's still a good ability. It's just you don't have to pay for it anymore, so enjoy that, Adept players. In the movement phase, they can take the upgrade Psionic Presence. This is a passive that says friendly units targeting an enemy unit within 4 inches of the Shade token receive Precision 1. I think you might want to always take this, and it gives you a reason to use Psionic Transfer even if you're not going to use the mobility aspect of it, because now you're getting Precision 1, and this is any friendly unit targeting it. So you can throw this down, and your Adepts get Precision 1 when shooting that unit. Your Zealots get Precision 1 when charging the unit. Your Stalkers get Precision 1 while shooting the unit. I think this is a great upgrade, and it is a group upgrade that everybody is getting access to. So Psionic Presence, I think, is maybe not an auto purchase, but it is a very high consideration. We've got 2 abilities in the Assault phase. Resonating Glaives. The unit's glaive cannon gets buff ROA 1 for 1 psi. Basically, you can spend a psi in your activation phase to give them 3 shots per gun instead of just 2. That's probably good enough to spend a psi on, especially on a turn where you really need to shred a light unit with their guns. I think psi is going to be a very difficult resource to balance just because a lot of units have good abilities in Protoss, especially if you're running a number of sentries. So you'll have to be tricky how you juggle that, and I don't know if you'll always be able to spend one on Resonating Glaives. But if it is kind of a direction you want to go and you want to focus on Adepts as kind of your heavy damage dealers, getting extra dice per model is great. At a full strength unit, that's 4 more dice hitting on 3s, and that's just strong. You can also pay for Guidance, which says the unit's glaive's ranged weapon gains anti-evade 2. Anti-evade does not stack, it does not become anti-evade 3, it just gets upgraded to anti-evade 2, which is nice. I mean, that is more anti-evade. It makes them, again, better at shooting things they're in combat with, or things that burn an ability for a evade roll. It's really going to depend on how the meta kind of shapes out in terms of melee versus ranged. It's an ability that you're not always going to get against range. In fact, you usually won't get against ranged targets. But it is an ability that is going to be really, really common to see come up against melee targets. So if the meta goes for a more combined arms style or a melee focus style, I think you'll see Guidance a lot. If it tends toward ranged, you might not see it taken as often. And finally, you can pay for a Glaive Strike upgrade for your melee strike. This makes your melee attack hit on 3s and has Surge Light D3 with Pierce Light 2, so it does 2 damage against melee targets that are light, as well as the Surge bonus, so it will kind of destroy light units in melee, but it's still only 1 dice per unit. 30 points is kind of, and again, the points might change in the beta, but for right now, they're 30 points. That's a bit of a steep upgrade for a unit that really does not want to be in melee. Shooting or rolling 1 die per model, yes, your 4 die are going to be more accurate and you're going to have that surge bonus, and maybe you'll also get, if you've taken Psionic Presence to get precision against the unit you've charged, it can become fairly reliable. I just don't think it's still enough dice. I think if you have the points sitting around and you kind of want your Adepts to be a troubleshooter, all-arounder type of unit, you might take Glaive Strike, but for me it's a little bit more up in the air. I think for me, if I'm going to be upgrading my Adepts, Psionic Presence is going to be almost an auto-take for me, and I will usually consider Guidance, especially in these early phases of the game, where I think Zerglings are going to be a major portion of the metagame. Overall, the Adept is kind of the fast but squishy alternative to the Zealot's slow and durable. Their range is actually quite good, to the point where I might consider taking Resonating Glaives, but I think baseline for the points you're paying for them, just getting 2 reliable shots per model that has good surge and you get bonuses from Psionic Transfer, I think they're just going to be pretty reliable range core units. Like a lot of core units, they might not be the hero units in your game, they might not be the thing that kind of wins the game for you, but they will kind of always pull their weight and be really good bread and butter. So I think Adepts are very well designed at the moment and pair very well with Zealots as intended. Next, we've got our elite unit, the only generic elite for Protoss so far. There's a factional specific elite, but Stalkers are the kind of big beefy unit for Protoss. There's only 1 in the base unit. You can run a unit of 2 Stalkers if you so desire. I think they might be better served as single small units, especially with how speed works in the game. But, you know, with buffs, you might get extra use out of having that second model, for instance, because buffs apply to the whole unit. So 2 in a unit is going to get the benefit. You know, there's pluses and minuses. They have these stat lines. So they are 2 shield and 7 HP, so effectively 9 HP for a single model. Their speed 4.8, so average. Evasion 6 is not great, but armor 4+ is pretty good. And they are size 3, which does have certain effects. They get the passive squadron. They have a 4-inch horizontal coherency. These models are on quite large bases, so that makes sense. If you're running units of 2, this is going to come up, but obviously for single models it doesn't matter. In the movement phase, they have their iconic Blink ability. Now this costs 1 psi, but you resolve the place 6 effect. Models placed by this effect cannot be set up within engagement range of enemy unit, which is a very reasonable restriction. Place 6 means just teleport 6, and that can be done before or after you move, meaning a single Stalker, who is speed 8 because it's the only one in the unit, gets to move 8 and then teleport 6 every turn for 1 psi. Again, I said before that this is a very psi-hungry faction, and this is a great example of it because you do kind of want to be blinking every turn. It is very powerful to have that much movement on a good long-ranged fighter type. Speaking of which, their ranged attack, Particle Disruptors, 12-inch range, which is the solid average range, targets both air and ground. It only has 4 dice for a single model. It's probably correct for the points. It does feel a little bit low, but it is hitting on 3+, so it's very accurate. It's Surge Armor D3, which is good because while I do think the metagame leans a little bit light-heavy right now, more armored stuff will be added in the future, and that'll be very important. And it's also very important for like clearing roaches and stuff. And these are damage 2. Again, most attacks in the game are damage 1. Damage 2 is kind of at a premium, especially like this, where it is damage 2 against everything and not using piercing to get damage 2 against its specific type that it likes. So Even though it's only 4 dice, hitting on 3s, damage 2 does make particle disruptors a very, very solid shooting attack. Especially one that can reach really far. When you move 8, teleport 6, and shoot 12, that's a 26-inch range. These things are shooting most of the board, basically any turn they feel like it. In the combat phase, they get 2 dice hitting on 5s for 1 damage with no surge or keywords. They're not a melee unit. Like, maybe you'll use it to finish off an opponent. You don't really want to be in melee with Stalkers. And the nice thing about Blink, I should note before going on too far, is that Blink, the place effect, doesn't care if you're in melee range. So Stalkers don't have to make disengage actions if they are willing to spend a psi to place themselves out of melee first, and then just go for a walk, or then just kind of reposition afterwards. So you really shouldn't be in melee range unless something has gone terribly wrong. Stalkers only get 2 upgrades. They can take Path of Shadows, so in any phase you can spend 1 psi to become hidden until it performs another action. This is massive. Now, I talked in the previous video for the Zerg video, if you haven't watched that, about how I think hidden is going to be fairly rare, and I do still think it is. You have to buy this upgrade, you have to spend psi on it, and you can't do any other action, so you can't run around while hidden. But a Stalker that is hidden, just kind of like, oh, I'm not going to be in range to shoot anything and I need to protect this point, I'm just going to become hidden on this objective or hidden in this area that's going to become very crucial later on. That's going to be a very difficult thing for your opponent to deal with. I do think you take this. I think you often spend psi on it. Again, this is a very resource-hungry faction, and we're seeing that more and more because every one of these abilities so far has been very strong. Their other upgrade is a passive, so doesn't require any psi, which is nice. In the assault phase, so when they're shooting, if this unit attacks an enemy unit that was already activated during this phase, its particle disruptors gain critical hit 2. Hey everybody, Editor Zach here again. Just wanted to jump in. This ability has been changed as well since the beta. Things are very rapid right now, so in the time between recording and coming to edit, things have been updated. This originally gave the unit critical hit, which is a really powerful ability. Now it gets instant instead. Instant is still quite good. It's still probably worth taking. What instant does is it means that your opponent doesn't get to use any reactive abilities when you declare the shooting attack or while you're taking it. So any abilities that reduce damage or let them reroll dice or reduce your ROA if they have a debuff that triggers on your attack action, none of those can be used against Stalkers that have Fury of the Nerazim, and it's probably worth taking specifically for that reason because there are some good debuffs and there are some good defensive bonuses that factions can get. I don't know if those abilities will be a core component of the metagame going forward, but I think at least early on we will see a lot of them, and your Stalkers will feel much more effective with instant on their weapon. So I think both of the upgrades for the Stalker are extremely good choices. Now the Stalker, I do think, kind of puts the Adept to shame in terms of a mobile shooting unit. The Adept is more... It's got a little bit more trickery. There's more models in the unit, which has its pluses and minuses. I think if you really want a dedicated shooting unit, the Stalker is better. But again, the Stalker is more focused on armored with that surge, while the Adepts are stronger against light. I think having both will make your combined arms force feel a little bit more well-rounded, but you also wouldn't be taken amiss by focusing on Stalkers over Adepts either. I think that's really up to the individual player and how they want their faction to work and what they want to be doing. The last basic unit we're going to be talking about is the Sentry. This is the support role that the Protoss get. The Sentry is not really a killer, but it is interesting. Let's take a look. It's got 2 shield, so pretty decent, a little bit of extra health. It is 4/7 speed, so average speed. No evasion, which is a bit sad. 5+ armor, very squishy, but each one has 5 HP. They're size 1, so quite small, and they come to a unit of 2 when you purchase them. So 5 HP with 2 shield means effectively 12 HP for the unit. That's not terrible, but low armor is going to mean that they will explode once things actually start to look at them. Now, where these things live and die is on their abilities. It is a caster unit after all, so let's take a look. They have 2 movement phase abilities. You can spend 1 psi to do a force field, which you place down a force field token, which is a physical token that they're going to sell, which is awesome. It has to be placed within 8 inches in an unoccupied space. Units of size 2 or lower cannot move across force fields. Models of size 3 can move over it and destroy it. It does feel a little funny because in the video game you have to be as big as like a Colossus or a Thor to be able to destroy force fields. A Sentry can step on a force field, or a Queen can in the tabletop game, but that is a pretty reasonable balancing act, I think. Force fields are great anytime you can just set up terrain that your opponent can't deal with, can't remove outside of physically moving onto it with specific units. These things will stop Zerglings from reaching you. They will stop Zealots from reaching you. They will block off the retreat of Marines who are trying to get away. It is generally just a good thing to be able to dictate the flow and shape of the battlefield, and sentries get to do it for 1 psi. So really nice. You're not always going to use it because, again, a very psi hungry faction, but it is genuinely a very good use of psi when you come down to it. The other movement phase ability is Guardian Shield. Any unit's range attack targeting a friendly unit within 4 inches is made with 1 fewer die in total. This is, you activate it for 1 psi and it is for the whole turn. So this can be really, really powerful. Now, a 4-inch bubble is not that big, and game boards do require you to spread out. I don't think the sentries can spend their entire game just like hugging a unit of Zealots 4 inches away. Maybe they can with Adepts or Stalkers, but both of those units will outpace the Sentry quite quickly. So you'll probably use Guardian Shield early on when you kind of have your forces together, and then as reinforcements come in and units spread out, you'll probably not find as much use for Guardian Shield because you don't spend the game clustered up that much. In general, though, the effect is good. I mean, reducing dice by 1 in total, like, that's not going to affect a unit of Marines rolling 12 dice at you, but we just looked at the Stalker, which only has 4 shots in the whole unit. So you're reducing it by 25% just by the Stalker shooting into Guardian Shield. And that can be really, really impactful for those high quality, low quantity type of attacks. Now, as for attacks, the Sentry has its own shooting attack, which is Disruption Beam. 8-inch range, a bit short, targets both air and ground, great. 2 dice per model is not fantastic, but it hits on 2s, which I believe is the most accurate in the game. Now, it doesn't have Surge, and it doesn't have any specific thing like anti-evasion or precision, so it's always just 1 damage, but 2 dice hitting on 2s is nice. It does have instant, however, which means opponents can't react to it. This isn't a massive thing since, you know, the Sentry's not really your killer gun. It's not going to be running around cutting down entire swaths of enemies by itself, but that does, occasionally your opponent will have a reaction to the shooting, and they can't take it against Disruption Beam. That's very reasonable. It's a decent attack. It's pretty good for the caster unit. It makes them not entirely useless when you don't want to spend psi on them or you don't have a good place to put down a force field. It keeps them somewhat relevant. But if you're not using the abilities and you're just running around disruption beaming the entire game, they're not going to pull their weight. In melee, their disruption beam is still pretty decent in that it's 2 dice hitting on 2s, but again, no surge, no precision, no whatever, damage 1. They're chipping damage. They're providing reliable 1 damage, 2 damage shooting or melee attacks, and that will help follow up with other units. They do get 2 upgrades. The first is solid field projectors. Hey gang, Editor Zach here again. I'd like to say that the beta changed this and I had to come back and re-record it, but I just genuinely misread this the first time and thought it talked about doubling up Guardian Shield instead of Force Field. It has been changed in the beta, but just the wording cleanup. Solid Field Projector effectively lets you use Force Field twice per turn. It's now an active that uses 2 psionic energy and puts down 2 force fields, whereas Force Field is only 1 psionic energy for 1 force field. Solid Field Projector as an upgrade is probably worthwhile. 2 psi is a lot. Again, we've already talked about how psi hungry this faction is and how the resources are going to be really hard to balance out. But 2 force field tokens within 8 inches, they don't have to touch each other, so you can just leave a space between them that is smaller than the smallest opponent's base size, and they can't walk through them. So 2 force fields is like a lot of terrain that the opponent straight up cannot walk through in any capacity unless they are size 3 or more. So I think this is probably worth having. Many turns you will just be using the 1 force field regular ability, but the ability to throw down 2 force fields at a time and just completely block off a section of area, especially if you get to combine it with terrain that's already there, very, very powerful, and sometimes that 2 psi will just win you the game against certain units. So good upgrade. Ignore the other stuff that I have cut out of this video and I'm not going to say anyway. The other upgrade is Hallucination. This is an assault phase spell. This costs 0 and it's a reaction. When an enemy declares a ranged attack against another friendly unit within 4 inches, the friendly unit is eligible to make an evade roll. This is pretty good, especially since it costs 0. Zealots have a decent but not great evasion of 5, so do Adepts. So just allowing those units to survive a little bit longer is good. A Sentry next to a unit of Zealots or a unit of Adepts with both Guardian Shield up and Hallucination purchased can make them just a little bit more durable in general. They're very good. Like I said, I don't think things like Sentries are going to be able to spend the entire game just playing buddy-buddy with another unit, especially with how few units are on the board and how tight supply can be in various parts of the game. Just having a Sentry that babysits other units probably isn't going to come up as much, but luckily their Disruption Beam remains a decent but not massive shooting attack that can still contribute once they've kind of run out of range for their abilities. I don't ever foresee myself taking more than maybe 2 units of Sentries because of this. 1 or 2 is probably fine and will find its place in factions because Force Field is still very good and Guardian Shield can be very good, but I don't think it's something like the Queen where I'm fine spamming 3 or even 4 Queens in a list. I would be very iffy to take 3 units of Sentries, I think. But 1 or 2 is going to be very impactful and good for the game. Next, we've got the hero Artanis. Interestingly, Artanis does not have the keyword for either of the factions that Protoss can pick for their main subfaction for their army list. So you can use Artanis in either one. So he's not necessarily faction locked like some of the other units we're going to talk about right after him. But he is a hero and he is a beat stick. Let's talk about him real quick. He comes with 4 shield and 8 HP, so he's effectively 12 wounds. He has 7 speed, so he's very fast. He's 5 up evasion, 4 up armor, so just like a Zealot. And he's size 2, so standard. He is only 1 supply, but he does have the commander passive ability that says he's counted as supply 2 for purposes of controlling objectives, mission markers, etc., and resolving disengage actions. So he is going to be very good at holding objectives and contesting objectives in the middle of the board. He's fairly durable, he's fairly fast. Let's look at what else comes. He has another passive called Phase Prism. When deploying from reserves, this unit may be placed in base-to-base contact with a friendly, unengaged unit, then immediately remove that friendly unit from the battlefield and return it to reserves. This placement counts as the unit's move action, and its activation ends immediately. So basically, if you have a forward unit, a Stalker that can move and then place itself, or a unit of Adepts that have thrown out their hallucination and have then jumped forward, he can then, on the next turn, come in where they are using Phase Prism and set himself up in the middle of the battlefield and maybe very close to the opponent's lines. So Artanis has his own built-in free forward deploy. Now this does take the other unit off the board, so you're going to end up juggling your reserves around a little bit. You'll have to take that under consideration, but man, is it very good to get Artanis up the board and in the thick of things really, really, really fast. In the assault phase, he doesn't have a ranged weapon. It might not be surprising because he's effectively a zealot. He has 3 abilities though. The first is Hierarch's Stand. Now this is a 1-psi reaction. When a friendly unit with an 8 is the target of a ranged attack, it needs to make a defense roll. Redirect it to Artanis. This unit is eligible to evade rolls. The special ability works until the end of the current activation. So for 1 psi, you can force the opponent to shoot you instead of another nearby unit, and you get the 5-up evasion on top of it. That's pretty good. Now, you don't always want to get shot on Artanis. Like, he's durable, but he's not that durable, right? So he will die if he's under focus fire, but there will definitely be times where he's almost full health and you want to save a unit of Adepts, or the Sentries are getting focused down and you need their buffing abilities and Artanis can take the hit. It's good. You'll, again, a very psi-hungry faction. This is going to be something you have to at least consider, at least have in your back pocket if the situation ever comes up for it. Then you've got Lightning Dash. Immediately after this unit resolves a successful charge action, this unit may immediately declare a second charge action against a different enemy unit, ignoring the restriction on charging while engaged. For 1 psi, you can charge twice. Now, quickly, he has Devastating Charge, so he gets 6 impact hits on a 4+. Lightning Dash, because it's 2 separate charges, will trigger charge 1 unit, give it 6 impact hits, charge a second unit, and then attack with your combat weapon in the subsequent phase. The ability to charge twice is quite crazy. It also gives you crazy reach because it's 7 plus d6 both times, meaning that depending on how you contact the first unit, you can then extend your charge to a unit way further back that may have thought that it was safe. Overall, just really, really, really powerful. I can see you using a psi on Lightning Dash almost every single turn, but I think I've said that about nearly every ability we've talked about so far. So this is going to be a very difficult problem for Protoss players while they're learning the game. And then once he gets into melee, still have to talk about that. He has 2 hits. You can either take the Strike, which is only 2 dice, but they hit on 2 and are Surge Armored D3. They are 3 damage. 2+ is not an auto hit, but it's pretty close. That deal 3 damage is very tempting. However, on the other hand, you have 6 dice hitting on 2s. This is the sweeping attack. These are Surge Light D3 plus 1 at only damage 1. The max amount of damage you will get out of either attack is 6, right? It's either 2 attacks for 3 damage or 6 attacks for 1 damage. The Surge is probably going to decide which one you choose against which target, but both of these are great. Both of these will maybe not kill a unit by themselves because 6 damage usually isn't enough to like table a unit in one go, but you're doing this on the back of Devastating Charge for probably 3 hits on top of it, potentially up to 6, and you're doing it on the back of other units shooting into them. So Artanis is probably one of the premier cleanup units in the game, because if you leave 2 units weakened in the assault phase, he can charge 1, potentially kill them with impact hits on his Devastating Charge, then charge the other one for 1 psi and sweep it up with his Twilight Blades. It's really hard to find a fault here. I think the Artanis is a great model, and I think he's going to be a heavy pick in most Protoss lists, regardless of which subfaction you go for. He really is a power piece. Now, he's not going to win games by himself, and he doesn't give the type of force multiplication that perhaps Raynor does when we talk about Terran. So he's more of a beat stick piece, but he is a very good beat stick piece, and you will not regret taking him in your list. I don't think he's an automatic take. I don't think that Protoss lists without Artanis are going to be bad, but I think when he is in the list, he is going to be noticeably in the list. Now, the Kali are one of the subfactions that Protoss get. It's one of the armies you will select when you do your list building. They get their own specific type of zealot called the Praetor Guard. They come in the same unit size as regular zealots. They are 3 models for 2 supply. They have the same HP, shield, speed, evasion, armor. They're the same stat line. So let's look at the things that they get for the extra point increase and for the unique tag. They get Tough 2, the first armor roll rolled each round. That's very powerful. Tough is when you roll your defense dice, you take 2 failures and they become successes. It makes them quite harder to kill over time. In the movement phase, they have leg enhancements. This unit performs a 2-inch move action. This is the upgrade that regular Zealots can get. You can spend a psi to do it. They just have it already upgraded for them. Just like Zealots, occasionally this will be useful to just give you that extra speed to get where you need to go, and a lot of times you won't use it because you either won't need it or you'll need to save the psi. So it's nice that they already have it baseline. In the assault phase, they have both charge and devastating charge. Devastating charge is their impact hits. They get 3 per model at a 4+, which is great. And they also have the same charge as regular Zealots, which is spend a psi to roll 2d6 instead of 6 for charge distance. These are both very good. Everything I've said about Zealots applies here. Where they differentiate themselves are the melee weapon. So their side blades are 4 attacks each, hitting on 3s, Surge Light D3, and very strong weapons. Passively, when they make a close combat attack with side blades, if the target is size 3 or higher, the weapon damage is treated as 2. So any big unit that is Goliath, that is Sentry, that is the Queen, you are getting double damage against, and the accuracy, they will just shred through big units. And finally, they have precognition. This unit is eligible to make an evade roll against all attacks targeting it. All attacks in the combat phase, because it's a passive for the combat phase, means that in combat, even against melee attacks, they are 4-up armor, 5-up evasion, and if it's the first time they're being attacked this round, they're getting that shield overcharge tough 2. Praetor Guard are going to be very hard to kill, and they are going to butcher anything that is size 3 or higher, and they're still going to butcher a lot of light units that are not size 3 just because of their surge. This is a very, very strong unit. Definitely worth the points, even though at 300 points it is currently like one of the most expensive single units in the game. These things will cut down opponents very, very, very quickly. And finally, we have the Pylon, which is a structure, not a unit, but it does have a unit card, so we're going to talk about it. This is also specific to the Kali faction. You don't deploy it. We'll talk about how you get it on the board later. But for the Pylon itself, it has 8 HP and 2 shields, so effectively 10 health, because it's the only model in the unit. It has 5-up armor. This has basically the same defenses as the Nidus Worm or the Omega Worm that we talked about in the Zerg video, which basically is 10 health and 5-up armor. It's enough that the opponent has to focus on it to take it down. They can't kill it as an offhand attack, but if they want to kill it, they will kill it. The Pylon will not survive being focus fired for too long, but it will soak enough damage that your other units will kind of survive a little bit better. So what does the Pylon do? Let's take a look. Structure basically just says it can't make any actions. It's physically on the board. It does not go away, but it can never hold objectives. It can never, move. It can never charge, anything like that. It just has to sit there. The Kali Ingenuity ability says once per round, when a friendly unit is using psionic energy, if it's within 4 inches of the Pylon, reduce the cost by 1. This really helps because we've already talked about how psi hungry this faction is. It loves its resources and it will go overboard with it very quickly. So the Kali Ingenuity just gives you one more chance to use an ability that you might not have afforded before. When we talk about how this gets on the field, we'll kind of talk about the usefulness of that, but it will be useful for a lot of units. I mean, Sentry, Adept, and Stalker all are ranged units and can kind of play around the Pylon, either jumping in front and behind it or kind of positioning the Pylon central and then using it as kind of a base of operations for your attacks. But it's just a good ability in general. The final ability is Warp Conduit. In the movement phase, you can deploy a ground unit from your reserves wholly within 4 inches of this structure instead of a normal deployment. That unit's movement phase ends. Basically, you can bring one unit into the pylon instead of walking it in from your edge. This is one of the primary extra mobility tools that Protoss will get, and you only get it if you're Kali. Not to say that Kali is the correct faction to go for, but it does have the very powerful Zealot upgrade, and it does have this pylon, so that'll be a major consideration when you go figure out which sub-faction you wish to play. So when you go to choose your faction, when you choose Protoss, you're going to also have to choose a sub-faction when you start list building. The two Protoss sub-factions that we're going to get here on release, there will be more later of course, are the Dalam or the Kali. We've already looked at the units that the Kali get that are special to it, and the Dalam don't get any specific units to them, but they do get their own special abilities. So let's look at the changes between the two. So the Dalam, you get 1 elite slot, 1 support slot, and 3 core slots. We talked about this a bit in the Zerg video, how army building works. Basically, as you buy these cards, you unlock slots for units that you can purchase. So if you choose Dalam, you can take an elite slot with a Stalker, a support slot with a unit of Sentries, and 3 core slots with, say, 2 units of Zealots and a unit of Adepts. And then you can't buy any more units because you don't have slots for them, but the extra cards you will purchase will create more slots. So not only do the cards have abilities you wish to choose, but they also tell you how you can and cannot build your faction. So there's a interesting element of list building for this that we'll talk about maybe in further videos, but for now just kind of have an idea of these cards let me bring these types of units. So these starter cards, you always have to take 1 faction card, and they all usually have a good amount of slots on them. The Dalam gives you these 5 slots. It also gives you 1 of 2 reactions every turn, or you can use it to exhaust and get 1 psi. The first ability is a reaction in any phase. When a friendly unit receives damage, reduce the total damage by 2 to a minimum of 1. That's really, really, really powerful. Just being able to say, oh, that unit takes 2 less damage, even if it is to a minimum of 1, so you can't completely negate it, you get to dictate like who's dying a lot of the time. Yes, it's once per turn. Yes, it's a reaction, so instant abilities can ignore it, but man, I'll tell you what, just saying no to 2 damage every turn is probably going to feel very, very good. They also have a once per game ability, Mass Recall. Once per game, you can place a faction indicator anywhere on the battlefield. All friendly Protoss units within 6 inches of the faction indicator are removed and placed in reserves. It's a bit of a get out of jail free card. Say you've committed a little too hard to one side and now you're getting surrounded and flanked. You just mass recall and pull everybody out of there. Or say you have a unit that is about to die because it's taken a bunch of damage. You can mass recall and pull it into reserves, and then use your redeployment to pull something else out of reserves and replace it with a new fresh unit, for instance. I think it's going to be maybe not as useful because it's much more specific. I don't think you will need to mass recall every single game, but the games where you do need to mass recall, that one turn is going to be so impactful that you're going to just feel amazing when you play it. But Daul, the reaction that reduces damage, that I could definitely see myself using every single turn. So the Dalam, even though they don't get any special units, they get an extremely powerful reaction and a strong, if situational, once per game active ability. Now the Kali are no slouch. They're not completely just relying on their special Zealots and Pylon. They do have their own abilities as well. For Kali, you get 1 hero slot, 2 elite slots, and 3 core slots. The hero slot is currently only Artanis. We may see more in the future, but they may also be locked behind specific faction names. But for right now, that's the Artanis slot. The first ability that the Kali card gives you is Pylon Warpin. Once per game, place a Pylon unit anywhere on the battlefield more than 10 inches away from enemy models. This round Pylon is not eligible to use its special abilities, so you can't use the Pylon to warp stuff in or reduce psi cost on round 1, but you do set it up and then you can have it on subsequent turns. You'll probably always place this on round 1 or 2, even though that does make it a target because you're placing it really early on and out in the open when the opponent might not have other targets to even shoot at all. It does mean it will soak some damage, but you do want the pylon in play as quickly as possible because you want those abilities in play as quickly as possible. So if you're not dropping it on turn 1, you're definitely dropping it on turn 2, and if you haven't dropped it by turn 2, you're probably wasting this as an ability. The other ability is Bound by the Kala. At the end of this unit's activation, this is an active in the movement phase, you can select one other friendly unit that is eligible to activate in the current phase, immediately activate that unit. This lets you double activate. Not only is this good because it allows you to move stuff before your opponent can react to it and like get in the way or anything, but it means that you get to finish earlier and you're probably going into the assault phase with the first player token. I don't know if that's worth spending a psi for or burning the card for all the time, but there will be times where it does get you that first player token, or it does allow you to get stuff in position that you wouldn't be able to get into otherwise. The fact that it's bound by the movement phase does mean this really is just double activating movement. You can't like double charge or double shoot or anything like that, which is probably much more balanced, but it's a little bit situational. The times where you need to double move to make something function are pretty few and far between, but when they do come up, you'll want to be able to use this ability, and that's nice. Really, if you're going Kali, you're going for the Pylon and the souped up Zealots. I don't think you're really picking Kali. I think Dalam definitely has the stronger abilities. I mean, Pylon Warpin is an ability, but after that, it's only bound by the Kala, and I think both Dial and Mass Recall are stronger than bound by the Kala. But the Kala also gives you that hero slot, so you have a slot baseline for Artanis, and you don't have to buy around to get him in a different faction. So I don't think you could go wrong with either of these options. I think they both have their ups and downs. The Guard are going to be a really solid unit if you want to go Kali. If you go Dalam, you're just going to be way more durable because you're taking 2 less damage per turn, basically speaking. I think I will probably lean towards Dalam because I do love Dayul, and I think that's going to create really interesting play scenarios, but I think they're both great. Again, I have nothing bad to say about either one. And now we're going to move on to the tactical cards. So once you've picked your faction, you're going to build, I guess, a deck of tactical cards. These are buildings and abilities and units that are too big to be on the tabletop. And the way they're represented is cards that you purchase for Vespene gas and give you abilities throughout the game. Every card has its own set of abilities that you can use the card for, but you can also use the card to give you psionic energy to power the abilities on your units cards. So cards will kind of be the deciding factor. The more cards you have, the more abilities you can use, but the more expensive cards, because they do have a Vespene cost, the more expensive ones are going to give you more powerful abilities. You'll have to play the balancing act in how you want to build your list, and we're just going to go through each one. Again, because costs and specifics of things can change, especially this early on in the beta, we're not going to get too into minutia about which one's the best or whether these costs are correct or not. We're just going to kind of talk about them at a high level and what I think they're going to be used for and how they will play around in the meta. So we're going to start right now with the Forge. This gives you 1 psi if you burn it. It gives you 2 elite slots for your army building. So that's 2 Stalkers, or potentially the guard unit of souped up Zealots. The 2 abilities are a reaction called Ground Armor, used before a ground unit makes an armor roll. It gains tough 1 for this roll. That's great. It is 1 free dice for the save, and because it's before the armor roll, it is after the hit roll, so you get to see what your opponent hit with and what you kind of expect your armor to look like. 1 free dice is probably not going to save the unit's life if the shooting attack is too strong, but really anything is good. Alternatively, you can use this for ground weapons. The active ground unit's first used ranged weapon gains critical hit 1, just making your shooting attacks stronger. So if you're heavily focused on Adepts or you're heavily focused on Stalkers, the ground weapons are going to be very useful. You'll have to choose which one you want each turn. The fact that this gives you both offense and defense is very good. It gives you those elite slots, which you're really going to want. Stalkers are fantastic. And I think overall the Forge is going to be a pretty good pick. It's middling in price, currently at 35 Vespene. You'll get 100 Vespene in Skirmish. You'll get 200 Vespene in Standard Engagement. So 35 is middle of the road in price compared to a lot of other cards, which I think it's probably worthwhile. The next card we have is Observer. Again, this is middling in price. This one gives you 2 psi when you use it. Not that there are many abilities that we saw. I don't think we saw any that require 2 psi to activate, so I think often the extra psi you're getting from this is going to be a bit wasted. Perhaps this can be used, however, for the Sentry ability that allows you to use Guardian Shield twice. I suppose we'll see in a little bit. This gives you 1 support slot, and it gives you the active surveillance in the movement phase. Place a faction indicator anywhere on the battlefield. While within 6 inches, enemy units lose the hidden keyword. Hidden is a little bit rare. It's Burrow for Zerg, which in the Zerg matchup, that's going to be very important. And as we saw for Protoss, it's only on the Stalker if it stands around and does nothing else. That's going to be, I don't know if it's common enough yet for the Observer to be constantly taken. However, it will come up, especially in the Zerg matchup, and in the future when we get new units that have the hidden keyword. Again, we'll probably see Ghosts, we'll probably see Dark Templar, we'll probably see Lurkers. This will become kind of a required take at some level, because eventually you won't be able to stay away from hidden units, depending on how the releases go. So overall, I don't think it's super effective right now, and I think the 2 psi is a little bit wasted as there isn't really enough that you want to spend that on. But it's still not bad, especially if you are worried about dealing with burrowed units in the Zerg matchup. The next unit we've got is Warpgate. Now, Warpgate is a bit more expensive than the last 2 we've looked at. It gives you 1 psi and 2 core slots, which core slots are great in this. We saw that Adepts are solid little pieces, but Zealots are real beat sticks, so your core slots are going to be very useful. The first active ability in the movement phase is Warp In. This is when you are bringing in a model from reserve. You may bring it in from any table edge that is not a player's entry edge. You must end more than 10 inches away from any enemy model. You cannot use this ability if another friendly unit has already deployed this round. So the first unit you bring in from reserves, you can bring in on any table edge. This means you're going to be able to surround your opponent from angles they might not be able to respond to, or may not be able to cover all of them. You might be able to get to objectives before they are able to think about them. It's just very good. It's a forward deployment. Zealots love forward deployment because they want to be in melee. Adepts love forward deployment because they are very mobile and can use that forward deployment to kind of further get where your opponent doesn't expect them to be or can't respond to them. So it's just very good in general. And of course, forward deploy for Stalkers who are already so fast and can shoot things. You can just backstab with a Stalker way earlier than your opponent might expect you to be able to. The other option you get is Quick Strikes. The active unit's first used close combat weapon gains precision 2. Zealots are the main unit you want to use this on, or the souped up Zealots, the guard unit. It's great on basically anything. Precision 2 is just dice you don't have to roll, or at least dice that you don't mind failing exactly 2 of. So it'll be great on Artanis, it'll be great on Zealots. You can even occasionally use this on like a Stalker or a unit of Adepts that got locked into combat, because Precision 2 is just going to make their attacks actually hit. So yeah, Warpgate overall very good for the points. I think the forward deploy is going to come up quite often. You do want to close the distance very quickly, but Quick Strikes does give you an offensive option if you don't need to do any forward deploy or bring in reserves this turn. So great card. Love the Warpgate. Next, we've got Gate Chrono Boosted. This one is the same cost as the Warp Gate card, but is slightly different. You still get 1 psi from using it, you still get 2 core slots, you still get the same quick strikes that gave them precision 2. However, what you get is Zealot's Charge. The active unit gains buff speed 2. So instead of the forward deploy, you can every turn give a unit buff speed 2, which increases their movement by 2 inches. I believe that also affects their charge and run distance because it's in the same turn and it sticks around. But this will basically just make your units on the board move a little bit faster. So you can kind of consider both of these a similar option to one another, whereas the Warp Gate is going to allow you to get flanking maneuvers in, the Zealot's Charge is just going to allow you to get the movement units you have on the board in places faster. So however you want to play, I think will decide that. But also you can bring both if you have enough points in a larger scale game. They will be quite useful, I think, to be played back to back. Because next we have the Nexus, which is a middling cost card at 35 currently. It also gives you 1 psi and 2 core for your list building. It has an active in any phase. You can just give a unit's weapon instant. This is pretty useful against certain enemies who have a lot of reactions to attacks, whether that's reducing damage or getting tough or reducing your dice. Just being able to say, my attack is instant, you don't get to do any of your shenanigans, is good. But there will also be plenty of games where it doesn't come up. So it's a situational one. However, the other ability is Strategic Recall. The active unengaged ground unit is placed in reserves instead of performing an action. So in the movement phase, you can just pick one unit and recall it, kind of like the mass recall that the Daylom get. This will just allow you to pull a unit out of trouble. It will allow you to shuffle around your reserves by playing the current supply amount. It will allow you to commit a unit very deep and then pull away, maybe after you've baited your opponent into running and responding to them. Strategic Recall just has a lot of uses, and you'll just have to find where it fits into your game plan. I think the Nexus is a solid card for the price. Again, 2 core slots is great. Your core units are both fantastic. And while Ancient Pride and Strategic Recall are situational, the situations in which they are good are very good. So the next card is Power Field. Now, Power Field is interesting because it gives you 3 army slots. It gives you 1 elite, 1 hero, and 1 core. This is another way to get Artanis in your list if you go Daylom instead of Kali, because the Kali card gives you a hero. You can take Power Field to get Artanis in the Daylom faction. Elite and core are also good slots, as we've talked about before, so that's great. The reaction here is a Void Shroud. Now, Void Shroud lets you say before a ground unit makes an armor roll, it gains dodge 2 for this roll. Dodge 2, dodge is a more specific keyword. It basically says if the enemy unit gets to automatically move dice to the damage pool, for instance, if they have critical hit or if they are surging against you, and there's a lot of stuff that surges against light, you get to reduce the amount that gets moved there by 2. So you get to make an armor roll against 2 extra dice that you normally wouldn't have. Now, again, that's a bit situational, but there's a lot of surge in the game. It's kind of one of the core mechanics of the game. There's a little bit less in terms of critical hit, but that does still come up. Being able to just roll those 2 dice instead of not rolling the dice is good. So while you won't always be using this for this ability specifically, a little bit like the Daylom damage reduction one, just having it around is going to make your opponent think twice about how durable you can be, and it will just save your skin sometimes. So on a very important unit like a Stalker or on Artanis, I might end up using this just to keep that very important unit alive. So I think Power Field's great. I'll probably end up running one in a lot of my lists. The next card we have is a Warp Prism. This gives you 1 core slot and 1 psi when you burn it. It is one of the more expensive, in fact one of the most expensive cards you can buy, currently at 45 Vespine, but it is very worth it, as we'll see in a second. You have 2 active abilities. The first happens in the movement phase. and says, Warp Conduit, place a faction indicator anywhere on the battlefield more than 10 inches away from any enemy model. At the end of the round, you may deploy one ground unit from reserves in base contact with this faction indicator. It basically allows you to drop a token every turn, and at the end of that round, a unit can come in from reserves at that token. Much like the Warp Gate, this gives you forward deploying possibilities and flanking possibilities that you can't get just by walking around. Because of that, it's already a very good take. Again, you are kind of competing with all the psi-based abilities on various fighter cards because you will want to be using this card specifically for Warp Conduit every turn. Maybe not every turn, but on many turns. So Warp Conduit is a great ability. However, the other ability on here is also good. Phase is an active in the movement phase as well, and it says the active unit resolves the place 4 effect. So you can just pick a unit, or the unit that you are currently activating can teleport 4 inches. This can be really good for getting around terrain, getting out of combat that you don't want to be locked in, because again, place can take you right out of combat. Or for your units like Zealots or Artanis, just teleport you 4 inches forward so you have extra movement. Given that these units generally move 4, being able to place an extra 4 is effectively doubling their movement for that turn, if not more due to shenanigans. The Warp Prism has 2 insane abilities, both of which I want to use all the time, and it gives me a core slot, which, Zealots are great, and Zealots that can phase or Warp Conduit warp in are also great. So yes, Warp Prism, expensive, but probably worthwhile. Now, we've already looked at the Warp Gate. The Gateway is kind of the toned down version of it. It's much cheaper at 25 points. It's one of the cheapest cards you can get. It gives you 2 core slots. We might be getting into the point where there's too many core slots and you have to start taking cards that just don't have core on them. But again, this is a very cheap card, a very cheap way to get those slots open, and a cheap way to get 1 psi when you burn it. It has the same active as the Gateway, which is Quick Strikes to give the active unit precision 2 on their first use close combat weapon. This is still good. It was good on the other cards. It's good here. It's cheaper here, so it's potentially even better because you can bring Gateway, I believe, multiple times, and each time gives you at least either 1 psi or an activation of Quick Strikes. Gateway will probably see its way into decks, not necessarily for the core slots or even necessarily for Quick Strikes, but it is a very cheap source of psi that comes with a situationally good active ability on Quick Strikes and comes with those core slots. So I think maybe the psi on this is the more tempting part of it than the actual abilities, but either way, Gateway is worth throwing in your deck. So now, Nexus Overcharge, as you might imagine, is very similar to the Nexus, but it does have its differences. It's the same price, but it gives you an elite and a core instead of 2 core slots. It has the same strategic recall, which, as we talked about, is just as good, but it also has the reaction of Photon Overcharge. When an enemy unit enters from the battlefield from reserves via location other than its own entry edge, so anytime it uses a forward deploy ability of any type, that unit immediately suffers hits 3/1, which is to say it takes 3 hits at damage 1. 3 hits is not a lot. It's not going to kill anything that comes in. It might chip off a couple Zerglings. It may drop 1 Marine from the squad of Marines that comes in. But what it does is just soften up every unit, or not every unit, but at least 1 unit that comes on the board from another way. And if you're going to follow up, try to kill that unit with your units this turn, like if a unit deep strikes somewhere behind your line and then you want to turn around your Adepts and your Stalkers to shoot it, getting 3 extra hits before that can add up and help you kind of soften up that unit and then take it out. It's not going to be winning the game itself. It is a nice to have in that sometimes a unit will come on and you just need a little bit of extra damage against it before you send in your Zealots into it to try to finish it off. So in that way, Photon Overcharge is a nice to have, but I don't know if it's something you're going to use all the time. I think Nexus Overcharge is fine. It's not a card that wows me, but I think it's very reasonable to take Now, for people watching the YouTube video, the map I'm running on doesn't have the model for the Twilight Council, so you're getting the Templar Archives and the Dark Shrine. Take it or leave it. We're going to get them. We've got the card here. We know what the card says. Now, the Twilight Council is 40 Vespene, making it one of the more expensive cards that you can take in this deck. However, it gives you an elite and a support slot, which is quite nice. We actually haven't seen a whole lot of things that give the support slot, especially alongside something else. It gives you one psi when you use it, and it gives you 2 abilities. The first is a reaction that says use after a friendly unit resolves a place effect. That unit immediately resolves the heal 2 effect. Heavily, this is going to be used by your Stalkers who have blink, so anytime they blink, you can also burn Twilight Council to heal them, and Stalkers are big single model units, so having heal 2 is just going to be good in general. But really with some of the other cards, like the Warp Prism, you can use this on basically anybody as long as you get the combo off. If you use Phase from the Warp Prism and then use Veil of Shadows, you can teleport and heal to any unit. That might be very good for Artanis because he is a hero model and you want to keep him alive. It might keep that unit of Zealots a little bit healthier and allow them to carve up something that maybe they would have died against. It's nice. Heal 2 is not going to make or break the game because 2 health is not an insane amount, but it is a noteworthy amount. The other ability is an active. This is in the assault phase, and it is Weapons of the Firstborn. The active ground unit's first range weapons gain buff range 4. Increasing the range of a unit by 4 does allow you to kind of make trades. It makes those range 8 units, which are a little short range, the full 12 inches of range that you get on Marines, for instance, or on Hydralisks. So it allows them to box at that range, but it also allows your Stalkers to go to 16-inch range, which makes them very terrifying units because they have very high speed. They kind of get to dictate the positioning, and now they also get to dictate range distances as well. They'll be able to outrange those 12 range units and kind of box along at other ranges where people might have 16-inch range. So the Twilight Council is very expensive, but it's almost a must-take if you're running any number of Stalkers. Like, even at 1 Stalker, I'd consider a Twilight Council because Veil of Shadows might just keep the darn thing alive way longer than it has any right doing. Weapons of the First Board will occasionally come up, and when it does come up, it will feel game-breaking because it will allow you to shoot something that can't shoot you or shoot something that your opponent thought was safe. So 2 really strong abilities. It gives you the elite slot, so it does allow you to bring another Stalker. It's just a good card. I think Twilight Council will find its way into a lot of people's builds. Maybe not more than 1. I don't know. I'm not sure if this one can be duplicated, and even if it can, I'm not sure if I would. But 1 for sure, I think, is going to go in a lot of my lists because I think Stalkers are really good, and I think this is a great thing to take to make them even better. So that's the high-level overview for Protoss. As opposed to the Zerg, which we looked at in the last video, Protoss are obviously far more elite. You're obviously not going to be rolling around with big carpets of Zerglings like the Zerg will, and each of your models is very important. But if you can bring them to bear in the right angles at the right time, their stats really will overwhelm both other factions very, very quickly. You have a lot of unique tricks with the Stalker and the Adepts, and especially the Sentry, and certain abilities on cards is going to give them pretty unprecedented mobility between placing them, using Warp-In to get behind enemy lines, and Artanis being able to switch places with things in reserves. It's a very complicated faction that you're going to need to use your abilities very precisely on, but when you get good at using those abilities, I think they will feel very, very scary against a variety of opponents. If they have any weakness, it's probably in their ranged damage output. The Stalker is your best shooter and has low dice count, and the Adepts have decent shooting attack, but it's nothing special to write home about. They're obviously not Marines. They're not really even Hydralisks, if you think about it. They're really more tied into their mobility and trickery, and a lot of their strength is going to come from their melee damage output, and that is heavily in your Zealots, especially the unique Zealots for the Kali, and it's heavily in Artanis. So I feel like this faction, especially once they start to get some more units down the road, is going to be very well rounded. They hit a nice balance between melee and range. They hit a nice balance between combat stats and utility. And I think in the right hands, Protoss are going to be a real force to be reckoned with. But of course, as always, I'm interested in hearing in what you have to say. I'm very excited, obviously, for the Starcraft miniatures game. I hope you are as well. If you have thoughts on Protoss and how you think they're going to be in the game, or have any questions on various abilities and stuff, feel free to leave comments down below. And in the next video, we will talk about the final faction, which is Terran. And I hope to see you in the next one. And as always, stay cozy.